You ever have one of those facts about someone that's just a footnote? A quirk you note once, file away, and never think about again? For me, for nearly 2 years, that fact was about my coworker, Leo. Leo from accounting. Leo, who wore the same 5 rotation of gray and beige cardigans. Leo, with his perpetually kind, slightly tired smile and a head of sandy hair that was always just a little too long. He was the quiet, competent engine of our small office. The one who fixed the spreadsheet formulas when they broke, who remembered the login for the legacy server, who always had a spare USB cable. He was pleasant, unassuming, and he never, ever took lunch. I should explain. Our office, a mid-sized firm that handled logistical software for agricultural suppliers, was the kind of place that ran on routine. At 12:30 p.m., like clockwork, the herd would migrate to the break room or the deli downstairs. Sarah from marketing would unfold her meticulously portioned salad. Ben from sales would microwave something that smelled aggressively of synthetic cheese. I'd usually eat at my desk, scrolling through news sites. And Leo would stay. Right at his cubicle, fingers tapping steadily on his mechanical keyboard. If you asked him, "Leo, not hungry?" he'd just give that mild smile and say, "Big breakfast," or "I'm fasting today," or my personal favorite, "I'll grab something later." He never did. Not once. It became background noise, office trivia. Fun fact, Leo from accounting is photosynthetic. We joke about it quietly. We figured he had some medical thing, an eating disorder he was private about, or maybe he was just incredibly frugal and had a stash of protein bars in his drawer we never saw. It was his business. In a modern office, you respect quirks. You don't interrogate them. The first crack in that comfortable assumption happened on a Tuesday in late October. The air had turned crisp, and the office heater was fighting a losing battle against the draft from the old windows. I was working late on a client report, the kind of mind-numbing data compilation that makes your vision blur. The office was empty, a landscape of darkened monitors and empty chairs. The only sound, the hum of the servers and the distant groan of the building's pipes. I needed a specific file, a physical ancient contract from 2005 that we kept, for reasons known only to God and our CEO, in the filing cabinets in the basement. I hated the basement. Everyone did. It was a relic from when the building had been some kind of small manufacturing plant. It was poorly lit, perpetually damp, and smelled of concrete dust, mildew, and something else. A faint metallic tang that was always just on the edge of perception. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry insects, and half of them were burnt out, creating pools of stark light and deep, swallowing shadow. I took the key from the kitchen drawer, the one labeled basement with faded tape, and headed down. The metal staircase echoed with a hollow, gong-like sound with every step. The air grew colder, damper. I found the row of filing cabinets, their green paint chipped and bubbling, and started the tedious search. That's when I heard it. A sound. From deeper in the basement, beyond the designated office storage area, where the old industrial bones of the building lay under a thicker layer of dust. It wasn't a pipe. It was too rhythmic. A soft, steady shush, 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 like something being dragged, or maybe sharpened. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature went through me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the cavernous space. The sound stopped instantly. The silence that followed was absolute, and somehow worse. It was a listening silence. Logic, of course, provided an answer. It was the building. An old fan, a rat, my own tired mind. I found my file, my hands fumbling with the cold metal of the drawer, and practically ran back up the stairs, the echo of my footsteps sounding like pursuit. When I slammed the door at the top and locked it, I leaned against it, my heart hammering. I told myself I was being an idiot, a child scared of the dark. The next piece fell into place because of Sarah. Sweet, observant Sarah, who noticed everything. It was 2 weeks later, over coffee in the break room. "You know what's weird?" she said, stirring her oat milk latte. "Leo's shoes." "His shoes?" I asked. "Yeah, he wears those same sensible brown leather loafers every day. But the last few mornings, I've seen him come in, and they've been clean, like professionally clean. But the sidewalks are wet with rain and grime. Everyone else's shoes are a mess." She lowered her voice. "And once, last week, I came in early and saw him at his desk, putting them on, like he'd been here all night, in his socks." Well, that stuck with me. The image of Leo sitting in the silent pre-dawn office, sliding on freshly clean shoes. Where had he been? Why were they clean? It connected, in some primal, fearful part of my brain, with the sound in the basement. A basement he, as the most senior employee, had a key to. My curiosity curdled into a low-grade, constant unease. I started watching Leo, not with office camaraderie, but with the focused attention of a predator or prey. I wasn't sure which. I noted the precise time he arrived, always 7:58 a.m. I noted that he never, ever left for lunch. I noted the slight pallor of his skin, the gentle circles under his eyes that never got better or worse, just persisted. He was a man in a state of perpetual, gentle equilibrium. He never got sick. He never seemed overly excited or upset. He was a calm, still pond with unfathomable depths. Then in early December, Ben from sales didn't come to work. Ben, a loud, boisterous man with a laugh that could crack glass, just vanished. No call. His phone went straight to voicemail. His wife called the office, frantic. He hadn't come home the night before. The police were involved. It was a whole thing. The office was somber, buzzing with worried speculation. A missing person makes everyone look at everyone else differently. Everyone except Leo. Leo was the picture of sympathetic concern. He organized a card for Ben's wife. He took over Ben's pending accounts with quiet efficiency. He was the rock. But I saw something else. I saw the way. The day after Ben was reported missing, Leo came in with a new, subtle energy, a faint flush of color in his cheeks. He moved with a lighter step. And that day, at 12:30, as the office emptied for lunch, he did something he'd never done before. He stood up. He stretched, a long, languid movement that seemed to unkink something deep in his spine. And then he walked, not toward the exit, but toward the back stairwell, the one that led to the basement. He had a small, soft-sided cooler in his hand, one I'd never seen before. My blood turned to ice water. This was it. The footnote was about to become the main text. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to call the police, to do anything but what I did next. But the need to know, to prove to myself that I wasn't just crafting a paranoid narrative, was too strong. I waited a full minute, my own heartbeat loud in my ears. Then, on silent feet, I followed. The stairwell door closed with a soft sigh behind me. The light was dimmer here, the air already cooler. I could hear his footsteps below, steady and unhurried. I crept down, each step a calculated risk, pressing myself against the grimy concrete wall. At the bottom, the door to the main basement area was slightly ajar. I peered through the crack. Leo was across the large room, walking past the filing cabinets, past the old office furniture draped in dusty sheets. He was heading toward the far wall, a place I'd never ventured, where the shadows were thickest. He stopped at a heavy metal door I'd always assumed was an electrical or plumbing closet. It was marked with faded, flaking hazard stripes. From his pocket, he produced a key, Not the office key, but an older, heavier-looking one. He unlocked it, slipped inside, and closed the door behind him with a definitive clunk. I was alone in the buzzing silence. The smell was stronger here. Damp, mold, that metallic edge, and something new, something under it all, sweet and putrid, like spoiled meat and cheap perfume. It was faint, but it made my stomach clench. I should have left. Every sane cell in my body was electrified, screaming for retreat. But the hook was in me. The story demanded an ending. I had to see. I crossed the open space, my footsteps sounding monstrously loud. The striped door loomed before me. It wasn't flush with the wall. There was a gap at the bottom, maybe half an inch. A sliver of sickly yellow light spilled out, and from within, sounds. Not the sharpening sound, softer. The clink of metal on ceramic, a soft, wet, methodical click-clack noise, and a hum. Leo was humming, a tuneless, contented little sound. I got down on my hands and knees, the cold, gritty concrete biting into my skin. The smell from the gap was overwhelming, a blast of that cloying, meaty decay, mixed with a sharper chemical scent, like ammonia or strong bleach. I pressed my eye to the sliver of light. What I saw. My brain refused to process it at first. It was a sight so profoundly wrong that it simply short-circuited my understanding. It was a small room, perhaps a former clean room or a storage vault. Leo had made it livable. There was a small, neat cot in one corner, a hot plate, a mini-fridge, and a long stainless steel table, the kind you'd see in a morgue or a professional kitchen. It was spotlessly clean, gleaming under the hanging work light. On that table, arranged with fastidious care, were tools. Butcher's tools. Bone saws with fine teeth, cleavers, sharp, slender knives, and there were containers. Glass jars filled with clear liquid holding things. Pale, oblong things, thin, ribbon-like things. And Leo. Leo stood at the table, his back mostly to me. He had taken off his cardigan and was wearing a heavy plastic apron. He was working on something. With a surgeon's precise, calm detachment, he was using a small, curved knife to separate something reddish and fibrous from a long, pale bone, a human femur. I knew it instantly with a deep ancestral dread. The bone was too long, the shape too familiar. It had been meticulously cleaned. On a plate beside him, like a charcuterie board from hell, were neat slices of a darker meat, arranged in a fan. Next to it, in a small bowl, was what looked like marinated strips. He picked up one of the strips with a pair of tweezers, examined it, and placed it carefully into a large glass mason jar. He poured a clear liquid over it from a jug labeled formalin. Then he sealed the jar, wrote something on the label with a marker, and placed it on a shelf alongside dozens of others. This was his larder, his collection. The world tilted. My vision swam. I must have made a sound, a choked gasp, the scrape of my knee on concrete. Because Leo stopped humming, his head cocked, just slightly, like a dog hearing a distant whistle. He didn't turn around. He slowly, deliberately placed the curved knife down on the steel table. The click of the metal was deafening in the silence. "I know you're there," he said, his voice calm, conversational, as if we were at the water cooler. It wasn't shouted, it was just a fact, spoken into the stillness. "The door creaks on the stairwell. It always has." I froze. Every muscle in my body locked solid. Fight or flight abandoned me, leaving only a petrified, fetal stillness. He turned then. And he wasn't the Leo I knew. The gentle fatigue was gone from his eyes. They were sharp, focused, appraising. He looked at the gap under the door where he knew my eye was, and a small, polite smile touched his lips. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "You must be so confused," he said, taking a step toward the door. He didn't sound angry. He sounded understanding. "It's a lot to take in. Why don't you come in? We can talk about it. I can explain." Explain. The word was a spider crawling down my spine. I stumbled backwards, scrambling to my feet, my legs numb and clumsy. I didn't run. I fled. I erupted up the stairwell, crashing through the door into the empty office, the sound of my own ragged sobs echoing in the sterile space. I didn't grab my coat. I didn't shut down my computer. I ran out of the building into the cold twilight. And I didn't stop running until I was 6 blocks away, hunched over in an alley, vomiting until there was nothing left but bile and horror. What do you do? Who do you tell? My coworker is a cannibal. He has Ben's femur on his table. I saw it through a crack in a door. It sounded insane, even to me, and I'd seen it. The police would ask why I was in the basement, why I was spying. They'd go to the basement, find the room. And what? Leo was fastidious. He was smart. He'd have a cover, a hobby in taxidermy, medical samples. He'd smile his gentle smile, and they'd believe him. And then he'd know I'd told, and I'd be next on his stainless steel table. I called in sick the next day, and the day after. I was sick. Sick with fear, with tremors that wouldn't stop, with the constant phantom smell of that room in my nostrils. I debated quitting, moving cities, changing my name. But that felt like letting him win. What about the next Ben? The next quiet, disappearable person? 5 days after my discovery, I went back. It was a Saturday. The office would be deserted. I had to know. I had to find proof. Something undeniable I could take to the police. I brought a camera, a heavy flashlight, and a feeling of utter doom. The building was a tomb. My key turned in the lock with a sound like a gunshot. Inside, the silence was a physical presence. I went straight to the basement door. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped the key twice. The basement was darker than I remembered. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, catching motes of dust, dancing like spirits. I went straight to the striped door. It was locked. Of course it was, but I was prepared. In my panic-fueled research, I'd learned about lockpicking. I was terrible at it, but this was an old, simple lock. After 20 minutes of fumbling, sweating despite the cold, I heard a click. The door swung inward. The smell hit me first, even stronger without the barrier. Chemical, meaty, deathly. I clicked on the overhead light. The room was clean, impeccably so. The steel table gleamed, empty. The tools were gone. The jars on the shelf were still there. But their labels had changed. They now read things like Specimen 12A porcine cardiac tissue and Sample 7C bovine ligament. Medical, scientific, a cover story prepared. I felt a crushing disappointment. He'd sanitized it. He'd known I might come back. I was about to leave, defeated, when my foot scuffed against something under the cot. I knelt down, my heart in my throat. It was a small, leather-bound journal, not hidden well, almost placed. I should not have opened it, but I did. It wasn't a diary of madness. It was a ledger. Neat, precise entries in Leo's unmistakable handwriting. March 14. Subject, transient, male, approx. 50. Source, under the I-5 overpass. Musculature poor, flavors gamey, stressed. Best for stews. Tendons preserved in jar 18. July 22nd. Subject, jogger, female, late 20s. Source, Ridgeway Trail after dark. Superior quality, lean, healthy. The sirloin was particularly tender, aged 7 days. Heart preserved in jar 29. December 3rd. Subject, Benjamin Riggs, coworker. Source, office parking garage. Opportunistic, Flavor is complex. Adrenaline, coffee, processed food, a unique terroir. Femur clean, marrow extracted, strip loin currently dry aging in fridge compartment B. I retched, dry heaves racking my body. It was real. It was all real. And he documented it like a sommelier reviewing a vintage. The last entry was from yesterday, December 8th. The narrator is observant, curious, has seen the gallery. This presents a dilemma. The flesh of the known carries a unique psychological piquancy. Fear is a potent marinade. Preparation must be careful. I think a conversation is required first. Understanding is the ultimate seasoning. He'd written it for me. He'd left the book for me to find. This wasn't a crime scene. It was a place setting, and I was the main course. The door behind me clicked shut. I whirled around. Leo stood there, blocking the only exit. He wasn't smiling. His expression was one of profound academic interest. In his hands, he held not a knife, but 2 ceramic mugs. Steam curled from them. "I made tea," he said softly. "I thought we could talk. You look like you have questions." I was trapped. The walls of the small room felt like they were closing in. The jars on the shelves seemed to watch with their glassy eyes. "Well, what are you?" I stammered, my back pressing against the cold steel table. "I am Leo," he said, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. He placed one mug on a small stool and took a sip from the other. "I have a condition, a dietary requirement, you might say. One the normal world cannot satisfy. It's not about hunger. Not entirely. It's about essence. Consuming the physical form is a way to absorb the vitality, the story of another being, its communion, the ultimate intimacy." He spoke so rationally, so calmly. That was the true horror. He wasn't a raving monster. He was a man with a philosophy, a code. He saw himself as a curator. "Ben." "Sarah," I whispered. Ben was loud. His essence was crude, but surprisingly robust, Leo mused. "Sarah, she is on the list. Her awareness is sharp. It will make for a nuanced flavor profile." He looked at me directly. "But you are different. You sought understanding. You passed curiosity and entered the realm of investigation. That shows courage, a strong spirit. It will be transformative." He took a step forward. I had nowhere to go. My hand flailed behind me, searching the steel table for anything, finding only smooth, cold metal. "This doesn't have to be traumatic," he said, his voice a gentle, horrifying whisper. "Fear spoils the meat, tenses the fibers. Acceptance, peace, that yields the most exquisite cuts." My flashlight was still in my hand. It was heavy, metal. As he took another step, the mug of tea held out like an offering of truce. I swung it with every ounce of terrified strength I had. It didn't hit his head. He moved with an unnatural fluid speed, and it caught him on the shoulder. The mug shattered, hot tea splashing across the floor. He didn't cry out. He just looked disappointed, like a teacher whose favorite pupil has failed a simple test. He dropped his own mug. It shattered too, and then his hands were on me. They were strong, impossibly strong. They felt like steel cables covered in flesh. I fought. I screamed. I kicked and clawed. It was like fighting a statue. He pinned me against the steel table, his face close to mine. That close, I could see the fine details in his eyes. They weren't human. Not anymore. In the depths of the iris, there was a faint, slow, pulsing light, like a deep-sea creature. "Shh," he hissed, his breath smelling of mint and something else, something earthy and old. The struggle only makes it hurt more, for both of us. I did the only thing I could think of. I stopped fighting. I went limp. The shock of it made his grip loosen. Just for a fraction of a second, I twisted, slammed my head backward into his nose. I felt a crack. and a hot spray of blood. Blood that smelled coppery and wrong, like wet pennies and ozone, splattered my neck. He grunted, a sound of genuine surprise and pain. His grip faltered. I shoved with all my might, rolling off the table and scrambling toward the door. I didn't fumble with the lock. I just pulled. It was still unlocked. I burst out into the main basement and ran, not for the office stairs, but deeper into the darkness, into the maze of old machinery and conduits I'd never explored. I could hear him behind me, not running, walking, a steady, patient tread. "You're only making the chase more interesting." His voice floated through the darkness, calm and clear. "It engages the metabolic processes, releases lactic acid. It will taste complex." I hid behind a massive, rusted gear assembly, my chest heaving, trying to silence my breaths. The beam of my flashlight was my enemy now. I clicked it off, plunging myself into utter, suffocating blackness. I heard his footsteps stop. He was listening. "You can't stay down here forever," he said, his voice closer than I expected. "I can. This is my home, my gallery, my hunting ground. I know every pipe, every shadow." I felt something then. Not a sound, but a vibration. A deep, subsonic hum that came up through the concrete floor into my bones. It was the building's old boiler cycling on in the depths, and with it, a memory. A schematic I'd seen once in the building manager's office. The boiler room was down here, past the old works through a low archway. I began to crawl, inch by agonizing inch, through the pitch black, my hands feeling the way through grit and slime. I could hear him moving, too, a soft scuffing sound off to my left. The air grew warmer, thicker. I found the low archway, a deeper black against the black. I crept through it. The hum was louder here, a deafening thrum in the hot, oily air. I could make out shapes in a faint, hellish red glow, the giant iron bulk of the old boiler, pipes coiling like intestines, pressure gauges with trembling needles. And then I saw him, silhouetted in the archway. He'd found me. "The heart of the building," Leo said, stepping inside. The red light glinted off his eyes, off the blood drying on his lips. "A fitting place. All life is just chemistry, energy transfer. I am simply a more direct consumer." He moved toward me. I backed up until the searing heat of the boiler pressed against my back. There was nowhere left to go. He was within arm's reach when I did the only thing left. I wasn't stronger than him. I couldn't outrun him forever. But I could break the rules of his horrible, fastidious world. I didn't attack him. I attacked the gallery. With a desperate lunge, I grabbed not at Leo, but at a large, corroded valve wheel on a pipe that fed into the boiler's pressure release system. I threw my whole weight onto it. It screamed in protest, rust flaking, and then, with a sound like a dying beast, it turned. A jet of scalding, pressurized steam erupted from a ruptured seam in the pipe next to it. A blinding, shrieking white plume. It caught Leo full in the chest. He didn't scream. He made a sound I hope to God I never hear again. A wet, guttural hiss, like meat hitting a red-hot griddle. He staggered back, his form blurring in the billowing steam. The perfect, placid mask of humanity melted into something raw and furious. I caught a glimpse of stretched, pale skin, of that strange light in his eyes blazing like a furnace, of a mouth opening too wide. I didn't wait to see more. I ducked under the steam jet, past his flailing form, and fled back into the dark maze, toward the distant promise of the stairs. I didn't look back. I just ran. I burst out of the building into the cold, clean rain. I went straight to the police. This time, I had the journal. I babbled, I shook. I was covered in grime and Leo's strange blood. They were skeptical until they went into the basement. They found the room. They found the jars. With the journal's entries, they had enough to test the specimens. Human DNA. Ben's DNA. They found the cooler with its carefully wrapped, aging cuts of meat in a hidden compartment of the mini-fridge. They never found Leo. The steam burn, the chaos. He vanished. They found a trail of that odd coppery blood leading to a storm drain grate in the basement corner. One everyone had thought was sealed shut. It was open, just wide enough for a man to squeeze through. It led to the city's underbelly, the endless, dark labyrinth of tunnels and sewers. The official story is that Benjamin Riggs was murdered by a deranged colleague, Lionel Leo Mears, who then fled and is now a fugitive, presumed to be dead in the tunnels or living under a new identity. The company shut down. The building was sold. I moved across the country. I changed my number. I have nightmares every night. Not of monsters, but of kind smiles and the shush, shush, shush of steel on bone. And I have a new footnote, a piece of office trivia that haunts me. It's about me. I never eat lunch anymore. You see, in that final struggle and the blast of steam and terror, some of his blood, that old, wrong blood, sprayed into my mouth. I tasted it. And now, the thought of normal food, it turns my stomach to ash. It holds no interest, no essence. I look at people on the street, and I don't see faces. I see, profiles. I imagine the terroir of their lives, the flavor of their struggles. The hunger is a quiet thing, growing in the pit of my being, a deep, hollow ache that no supermarket meat can ever fill. Leo was wrong about one thing. It's not just about communion or intimacy. It's about inheritance. He's down there in the dark, healing. And I'm up here, in the light, changing, waiting. The line between the hunter and the hunted is blurring. And the worst part, the truly horrifying part, is that a small, quiet, and terribly curious part of me can't wait to taste it.